Hi, welcome. In this video, we're going to be doing a little bit of a live demo of our microscopic adventure kits, Horizons and Horizons Lite. I wanted to do this in real time so that you can get a feel for what using these microscopes is actually like. A little bit about the setup. We have the Horizons microscope over here attached to the Horizons HDMI camera, and I have this running over to an HDMI splitter, which sends one of the HDMIs over to this monitor you can see in real time, and then the other one goes to a mini monitor I have back here so I can actually see what I'm doing backwards. And then on the Horizons Lite side, I have the USB microscope camera that comes included with it, sent over to my laptop, and then the laptop I have projecting over to an external monitor over there so I can see what I'm doing and hopefully do everything a little bit backwards here. Under the microscopes, we have two Microsafari Aquas that I filled yesterday from the local ditch, which is just a couple minutes away from our office. What I find really interesting about this, and I bet you're wondering what the heck is going on this screen right now, what I find really interesting about this is that these were actually taken from the exact same source, except that they were taken about an inch difference in depth. This sample was taken from the kind of mud layer, and then this one was taken from the top layer. So yesterday when I put this under the microscope, I went to an area that had nothing going on. It was just a totally blank spot. And then I came back 10 minutes later, and it was just completely full of organisms. And I was like, wait, what the heck just happened? So I sent it over to another completely blank spot. And sure enough, another 10 minutes later, all these organisms showed up. So I figured out what's happening here is called phototaxis, positive phototaxis, in fact, where these organisms are basically moving towards the light source that's on this microscope. So we have a really bright transmitted light source that is going up inside of here, and the organisms seem to love it. Whereas on this microscope, we have the same thing going on, but we're not getting the same kind of phototaxis. I think because this was taken in the mud layer, you can kind of imagine the organisms that like the light tend to go to the top layer where they can get the most light in the ditch. So that was pretty interesting. It's actually the very first time that I've seen this. So how about I even just move it over right now and see if they start showing up in a new spot. Maybe I'll go over here. See, there's like not really any creatures here. We'll wait a couple minutes and see if they show up. By the way, this microscope is currently in dark field mode. We can change that. On the Horizons microscope, you do get the ability to turn your bright field microscope into a dark field microscope, and also you get polarized light capabilities, which we'll go over a little bit later on in the video. Also, I realized I should start actually filming these so that you can see a comparison. Hit the film button there. Great. There we go. Okay, so we're in bright field over on this microscope now. We're going to kind of play around with that a little bit. Leave that here. One thing I want to note about the Horizons Lite setup and this USB microscope camera setup is that it's actually really easy to get it set up on a computer. You don't need to download any extra software or anything. I'm actually just going to close out of this real quick so that you can see how easy it is. So I'm going to type in, I'm on Windows right now. I'm just going to type in camera. Where's the A? There we go. Open the camera app. So essentially this USB microscope camera works like my computer thinks it's a webcam, essentially. So normally what ends up happening is that you'll get the front-facing camera first if you're on a laptop. So you can see it's filming some of my video set. And then if you go over here, there's a switch camera icon. You just hit that and it switches over to the USB microscope camera. So pretty handy. And we got that going on. Looks like I would need to leave this one, the Horizons one, on for a few more minutes before all the organisms show up. But I'm a little more impatient than that, and I would like to move on to the other samples we got here, and I'm sure you would like to as well. I'm going to take this out of here. Now we're going to switch over to Microsafari Terra so you can get a feel for this. This is a live ecosystem with live organisms that you get straight out of the box. And in fact, when you receive your kit, I highly recommend using Microsafari Terra first. This is going to be the most sort of immediate wow factor that you can get out of this kit. So I'm going to just place this over here. I am going to need to switch it into lower magnification mode over here and turn the transmitted light off this puppy. And now throw this on here. Turn on the reflected light mode. There we go. By the way, both of these microscopes do come with both reflected and transmitted light capabilities, which is really not something you find on very many microscopes, surprisingly, which is really a shame because, oh, and there we go. We already have our first live organism. I mean, no surprise. It's really hard to go somewhere and not find live organisms in Microsafari Terra. It's just absolutely, completely bustling with life. And you can watch as the ecosystem changes over time. You can watch the creature populations adapt and change, whatnot. This is a little nematode guy we're looking at over here. Let's see if we can find some other organisms. By the way, all these little strands that you see, these are all fungal mycelium, really wild. The other day we saw nutrients flowing inside of the individual strands of the mycelium fibers. Absolutely wild. I do want to do a little bit of expectation setting with these microscopes. Although this is a very nice 4K camera on this microscope, I do want to be clear here that if you're trying to get the same level of quality in a microscope and a microscope camera, oh, here's a little mite that we found, by the way. And also, this is at the lowest magnification objective. I actually kind of wish that I can get a lower magnification objective on this microscope, because this is I actually want to be able to zoom out a little bit more, but hey, I guess it's not a horrible thing. If it's better to be too zoomed in than too zoomed out, I suppose. Looks like that's a dead nematode here. So back to the expectation setting. These content creators you see on the internet, whether it's Journey to the Microcosmos or many of the various microscope TikTokers, they're all using really high-end setups. Some of them are using, $50,000 microscopes with a $3,000 camera. So although this setup gives you, very close to about 90% of the image quality, I want to be clear that you gotta pay a lot more to be able to get that highest level of video recording capabilities. The other thing I'll point out is that, very similar to photography, microscopy is a skill in and of itself, and the skill of the operator will determine what the final end product is quite a bit. So for example, in photography, a professional photographer can take an old iPhone and take better photos than a novice photographer with a $20,000 camera. Very much the same thing in microscopy. It really takes a lot of understanding to know what are the right illumination techniques that you need to use for certain samples, and then also how do you even do sample selection, how do you prepare your samples, and how do you match the settings on the camera to work well with the sample that you're using. So in this case, before I did this demo, I did actually set the camera settings to work the best with Microsafari Terra. Turns out it works pretty well with Microsafari Aqua too on the same settings, but I actually could have refined them a little bit more to get an even better image out of the Microsafari Aqua samples. There's got this little wandering mite guy that I've been following around for a while, but I'd like to go ahead and switch over to Horizons Lite so you can see what the image quality is on this microscope. Now I'm going to change this. First I have to lower the stage quite a bit, and I need to change into the reflected light mode. This is in fact a battery operated microscope. I do have it plugged in right now, but you do have that capability. Get zoomed in here. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with this USB microscope camera. I've tried a decent number of USB microscope cameras, and there is quite a big range of quality differences in these cameras. So this one we were really happy to get. I think it must be using a newer image sensor or something, because the quality of these images and maybe the compression algorithms that it's using to send over the video to the computer are really good, because you normally, when you're using a USB microscope camera that's going off of USB 2.0, they're limited in the amount of bandwidth that you can send to the computer. So usually it's 10 frames a second at 720p or something like that, which is really not great. And I frankly don't really know how they did it, but somehow this USB camera is able to do 1080p at I think this is probably like 24 or 30 FPS. It's quite good. I mean, it feels very smooth. And same thing here, where you can tell that this guy is a little overexposed, so we can adjust the brightness to get a little bit of a better image here. So overall, I'm pretty satisfied with this USB camera. Really good. And then, you'll notice that everything's a little bit more shaky when I move this around, of course, because you don't have a microscope stage on Horizons Lite. And this is one of the trade-offs that we had to make when we were deciding what to include in each kit. So really the big differences between these two microscopes, and actually let me just talk about what the similarities are first. When we were first designing out these microscopes, we really wanted to create an experience for customers that was the best possible user experience with the ability to use the widest range of samples and be the best educational experience all those things at a given price point. And so that's really how we decided what components to choose, what to include in the microscope, and whatnot. So of course it looks like we got something big. Wait, let's see if we can get this guy. Oh yeah, there we go. Ooh. Oh my gosh. Okay, that's super cool. Sorry, I'm gonna need to pause on my topic of comparing these two microscopes to get a good image of this guy. Oh, so cool. This is the first. So Micro Safari Aqua is really much more of a scavenger hunt experience. Like, for example, I've never seen this organism before. This is actually, we're doing this live, and this is the first time I've ever seen this creature in one of my samples. Really cool. And this is the sample that was taken in the mud. So this is apparently like kind of a more mud-dwelling organism, and we can see a fiber of algae over there. One of the challenges that I do have sometimes is that these creatures like to move around a lot, and it's a little hard to track them. Oh, okay, there's its leg. Found him. Oh, I love that. You can see all of the hairs on it and everything. You can see its eyes. And I don't know exactly what this creature is. Maybe an isopod of some kind. I'm not really sure. It does look like it's a crustacean. I'm much more experienced with terrestrial organisms, number one, but also I'm personally just much more experienced with the actual optics and equipment of microscopy, not as much the organisms and biology side of it. But I mean, I do think that what really makes microscope experiences amazing is being able to watch live organisms. There's just really something about being able to watch moving creatures that you've never seen before, doing weird, wacky things, some of these creatures, you can even see inside of them. You can see inside of their bodies. You can see their organs working. It's absolutely wild. But really the reason that I originally made Micro Safari Aqua and Micro Safari Terra was because I couldn't find, when I first got started in microscopy, I couldn't find any products on the market that really let me have live organisms, and specifically live ecosystems, inside a device that I could put under the microscope and then be able to observe these organisms as they're kind of living their usual lives. The ordinary way that you would have to do this, for example, on water samples, is that you would need to take that water sample, you would need to transfer it onto a microscope slide, put a cover slip on it. Like, this guy would have gotten smashed on a regular cover slip. You could use a microscope slide with a depression in it, which definitely works, but you still have the problem that these organisms are going to die on that microscope slide within just a few hours because the water will evaporate. So Micro Safari Aqua is a way that we can keep these organisms alive for much longer periods of time and be able to observe them in a little bit more of a natural way. Of course, you're always putting a bunch of light on these creatures, so they are going to generally start reacting to the light and whatnot, but we're kind of getting as close as possible there. And then same thing with the terrestrial samples with the soil organisms in Micro Safari Terra. There wasn't really any way to be able to observe soil ecosystems in a way where like the organisms can't just walk out. I think that the closest thing that I had come up with before I invented Micro Safari Terra was basically to put my soil samples onto a petri dish and then put them onto the microscope, which had its own issues, namely that the creatures could actually just walk out of the gaps, and then you had like tiny little, what are effectively like hexapods, cousins of insects, walking all over your microscope and like into your microscope optics and whatnot. So I needed some way for them to be totally self-contained and then live in this environment where they can then like lay eggs and they can reproduce and they can eat each other. I mean, it really is a whole ecosystem experience. I mean, yeah, you can see here, we still got nematodes. I'm sure there's been stuff going on over there. I haven't really been paying attention. I've been watching this cool little critter. Okay, before the distraction, where were we? I think we were doing a comparison on the microscopes and the trade-offs that we had to make. So let's talk about sort of what we think were the most important things to include to improve the experience of these microscopes, the usability, the customer experience, and the educational aspect. So number one, we decided that cameras were super important. This isn't something that's super well known by people that are just getting the microscopy, but like I think people have this idea that like they just really want to be able to look through the eyepieces, and there is merit to doing that. You do get higher resolution, like you can see more details if you do look through the optics, but it's pretty hard for a lot of people to actually do it and to dial everything in just right, especially if you are, especially for kids. Number one, I found that they always have hard times using these, but also if you have limited sight or you have an astigmatism, it really makes it much more difficult to look through these eyepieces. And so the microscope camera, the fact that you can project it onto a big screen TV of some sort, it really just makes it so much more accessible and user-friendly and easy to use. I do really love that on the Horizons kit, we were able to get an HDMI camera that you can just straight plug into a TV or a monitor and not need to, bother with software or needing a computer or anything like that. So I've been really happy that we were able to find this microscope camera out there. And then same thing over here. I'm also really happy with this USB camera that we were able to source. And yeah, same deal. And that's why, like, because we were able to get such a good camera on the Horizons Lite kit, I didn't feel that we really needed to upgrade to a binocular microscope for this kit, which saved a lot on the price. Therefore, we were able to add in a bunch of other things into the Horizons Lite kit. The fact, I expect that you're going to end up just using the camera instead of looking through this monocular eyepiece quite often. Of course, if you do want to look through the eyepiece, that is an option. I mean, this does come with, a traditional eyepiece there. Moving on, we did feel it was really important to include Micro Safari Aqua and Micro Safari Terra on both of these samples because maybe I'm a little bit biased here since I invented both these things, but I do feel that it elevates the experience by just so much. I mean, the fact having good samples is 80% of microscopy. And while you're using Micro Safari and Aqua and Micro Safari Terra, it just makes it so much easier to get samples, makes it so much easier to explore. And if you want to impress your friends and family, like Micro Safari Terra, you can just basically immediately put it on there and start finding live organisms. Like, let me just go to a random spot and see how quickly we can find live organisms. Well, there's something moving right there. And you'll notice I am having a little bit more of a difficulty moving this around on Horizons Lite than I was on Horizons because with that, the extra cost of the kit, if we could, and there we go, and we got some nematodes all in a little Slurpee pile together. With the extra price that we were able to put into the Horizons kit, you're able to get a high resolution mechanical stage so that, you can move very smoothly at very small distances, which become more and more important as we go up higher in magnification. So I'm going to switch over to my next highest objective. I believe this is a 10x objective. Another misconception I think people have is that like you want a microscope with these super high magnifications, like more magnification is more better. But I just personally really don't think that's the case. Like there's so many cool things that you can see at these lower magnifications. And on top of that, the higher of a magnification you go, it just gets so much more difficult to operate, to make your samples work well. There's just a whole slew of problems. If you want to kind of visit that topic, you can check out my YouTube video, the USB microscope lie. I talk about that a little bit in there. But anyway, with the extra price of the Horizons microscope, you also get a full a proper transmitted light condenser with an aperture, a diaphragm down here. And then you get one more objective. This does have an oil immersion objective on it. so that if you do want to see those super, super high magnification images, you can do that on this microscope. This one has the highest magnification you can get on this one. It does come with a 10x eyepiece, and then it's a 40x objective is the highest, so you can get up to 400x with this setup. To complicate things further, the microscope camera does add some of its own magnification. So I'd say the equivalent magnification you get on this setup with this eyepiece camera is about a 25x traditional objective. So that brings you up to, whatever 25x times 40 is. I'm not good at doing math in my head. And then on this one, you do get both 10x objectives and you get 25x objectives. So that gives you a full 2500x magnification on the Horizons microscope. And then there are just a ton of tiny components that are included with each of these. The Horizons, you do get some other specific components like oil immersion, oils, you get different sample slides, all that kind of jazz. By the way, this does come with some traditional sort of just static samples here. So this is a stained, I think it's like an onion or I don't know, it's some kind of a plant stem. I don't remember off the top of my head. We can move over to it. I do find that these are really helpful, especially when it comes to making sure that your setup is well optimized. So for example, I would use this to dial in my dark field to make sure that's showing up really well, and to get my settings all right on that. We also felt that it was really important with these microscopes to include reflected light in addition to transmitted light. 50% of the samples that you'd want to look at are transmitted light samples and 50% are reflected light samples. And it really blows my mind that you don't find more microscope options out there that have both capabilities, which, I don't know the exact reasons for that. I could be oversight on the manufacturer's end. It could be that they're trying to get you to buy two different microscopes. But we didn't feel that that was something we wanted to do. We wanted you to have a kit where you have a microscope that can do as many samples as you possibly can. Because I think the beauty of microscopy is really exploring and learning what it's like to use a bunch of different samples. So in that vein, I'm going to take a look at real quick over here, and I'll show you what this looks like over here. And then I do want to get to the polarized light capabilities and what you can do with that. So in this case, I'm switching over back to bright field on this microscope, zooming it in, and then boom. Oh, I guess I could show you what the highest magnification objectives look like as well. You probably want to see that. So zooming in, this is the middle objective on this one. And I do want to note that on Microsafari Aqua and Microsafari Terra, you actually can't go to the highest magnification objectives because of practicality reasons and optics of the thickness of the acrylic on these devices is too thick to be able to get these super high magnification objectives to image on it. So this is the highest magnification objective on Horizons Lite. Looks pretty great. This is a 40x objective. So yeah, pretty good. I mean, as you can tell, once you start going up to these higher magnification objectives, you don't necessarily resolve more details. There's a lot that really comes down to this sample prep and whatnot. So okay, I'll do the full range. This is in dark field mode. So this is my 4x objective on this. Moving over, we have this is the 10x, I believe, or is it? Yeah, it's 10x. Now moving up, we have a 40x over here. Still in dark field. This is the range where dark field stops really working that well on this microscope. So I'm going to take the dark field filter out and I'm going to adjust my condenser aperture. Camera has to do some auto adjusting. So you can see that it looks good. It doesn't look, in my opinion, as good as it does on the lower magnification objectives. And again, this just comes down to the optics of it and setting up the right sample. This is not completely an ideal sample to be imaging at these higher magnifications. And then we do have the oil immersion lens here. I unfortunately don't have the oil here handy with me. I otherwise would show that to you. Okay, I want to look at the polarized light sample that I set up and have ready to use over here. So this is copper 2 acetate, I believe. It's some kind of copper crystal. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'll note you don't get this with the kit. Sorry, this exact sample, but we will be including a guide on how to what samples work well in the different modes of microscopy, how you can find those and source those. So like citric acid is one that works really well. So under regular transmitted light, it doesn't really look like all that much. I'll switch it over to dark field so you can see what that looks like. Okay, like starts looking a little bit cooler, but when it really starts shining is switching over the dark field filter for sorry, I'm having to rummage over here to find it, for the polarized light setup. So we have a linear polarizing filter that can go down here, and I'm going to have to do this by feel since I can't see what I'm doing. Okay, so that's in there like that. And so far it does nothing. It is inserted. So there are two ways that you can turn this into a polarized light microscope. Number one, you can just take a piece of this polarizing film and just straight up put it in between the objective and the sample, and you'll see immediately that you start getting all these pretty fun colors. And if you rotate this, it changes the coloring of this. This is birefringence of the sample. Alternatively, you can put one of these filters inside of the microscope head itself, which I'm not going to do in this demo. It's a little bit much for me to do at the moment. With I have everything very particularly oriented to be able to capture this. But yeah, you can have it in there permanently, so you don't have to hold something under there. Let's move up to the next highest objective and see what that looks like. So all these pretty colors are because the light is different colors of light are getting bent and polarized different by the sample. And then with these two filters, we are selectively blocking out certain of the wavelengths. And then you can kind of see what that looks like over there. Okay, I think that about does it. Hopefully this was a helpful little demo so you can see what using these microscopes is actually like. There's going to be a lot more info on the website, and I might end up making deeper dives into each individual microscope. I don't know, I'll have to watch this back and see if I got all the info in there. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.